Hey everyone, Ariel Adams here with the Superlative Podcast. My guest today is Julien Tornare, now the CEO of TAG Heuer. Julien, welcome.
Thank you, Ariel. How are you?
I'm good. You are a serious watch industry veteran. At this point, you have seen most iterations of the modern watch industry. Before we talk about TAG Heuer, I want to talk a little bit about your history. You grew up in Geneva?
Yes, I did. Born and raised in Geneva.
Born and raised. You went to school in Geneva.
Right.
And you started working in the watch industry pretty fast. Was that like your first job out of school, or what was your first career?
Yes. My first, I would say, serious and real job. Yes, in 1997 already. So 27 years ago, right? I was still studying in the UK when I got in touch with a family-owned company called Raymon Weil, and I got my very first job that time, yeah.
Okay, so Raymon Weil, and did you know you were going to do that? Was it like, I grew up in Geneva, there's a small number of things I'm going to go into?
No. I mean, being Swiss, born and raised in Geneva, I always was deeply into the watch culture and environment. But initially, I'm not going to tell you the story of me willing to work in watchmaking since age of 2. It really came after. It came as a great opportunity, and I loved watches. I mean, I was happy to start my career in that. Yeah.
And when you enter the watch industry, what were you doing exactly? What were some of your first duties and responsibilities?
My first job was an area sales manager for the European markets. And I started that, working with distributors and agents all over Europe. And I have to say, over the first 2.5 years of my career, I traveled in every single country in Europe, wow, except maybe 2. And I managed to really start to get to understand the market very well. So that was my first job, yeah.
How big was the European market at the time compared to some other markets? Because I know right now, North America, Asia are, bigger markets for luxury watches than Europe. But back at the time in the 90s, how important was the European market?
It was definitely the main one. At that time, we started to feel that Asia was picking up. US was, I would say, at that time a little bit behind, and watches were not as popular as they became later. But Europe was really the strongest in terms of proximity, in terms of clients coming to Baselworld, which was nearby, and it was kind of a different time. Yeah. Europe was kind of the major market for sure.
I know it wasn't really that long ago now, just being, 20, 30 years ago at this point, but so much has changed, especially the internet, for people that just sort of never existed in that era. And I didn't start, in the watch industry till afterwards. I was very young in high school during most of that time. What are some of the major changes, or what were some of the differences? What were some things that typified the watch industry in the 90s that just seems like so alien right now?
But, first of all, you just mentioned it. When I started working my first few years, not many, but probably 3 first years, I had we didn't use internet. We didn't use emails. We had internet, but we did not use email. So we started having fax machines everywhere, and the people writing on the faxes, this is for you, this is for him, this is for her. So that was the way to do it. Traveling was not, I would say, as common as now. So when you were going for a trip, it was a longer trip. You did maybe less trips, but for longer time. So that was kind of more difficult, I would say. Obviously, no e-commerce, nothing. It was very much brick and mortar shops, and mostly multi-brand shops, I would say. They didn't have many boutiques at that time, at least for watches. Jewelry, they were already, but watches, there were very few watch boutiques. So it was more about going to see a retailer and across many brands and pick up your watch. That has changed.
When I hear you speaking, ironically, it sounds like almost another time, right?
Oh, yeah, of course. No, clearly. And, when I got my first job as CEO at Zenith, I basically invited my first boss at that time, because it was 20 years that I started in the watch industry, and I wanted to celebrate it with him and thank him for the opportunity he gave me. And we reminded ourselves about those times. Yes, no, it's a while ago. It's changed a lot.
I think one of the interesting ironies is that while the mechanical watch as a product, almost by nature, has to stubbornly stay the same. The last 2 decades especially has seen almost like quarter by quarter changes in the watch industry. That's a modern phenomenon, right? Or has it always been so tumultuous to be in the watch industry, whereas the product needed to be quite stable?
No, you're right. I think the biggest invention, the biggest creative approach in terms of mechanics happened already decades and sometimes centuries ago. And then it was kind of stable. And it's true that I would say over the last, 10 to 15 years, innovation came back very strongly. Innovation came back very strongly in terms of material, in terms of some movement components, obviously connected watches, and we are a big player in that. These were all new things that, in my opinion, are playing a key role in the watch industry to show new generation that we don't only repeat the past. And the most innovative brands over the last 10 to 15 years have probably contributed to keep younger generation interested in mechanical watchmaking, and that's very important to work like that at the moment. Yeah.
What are some of the biggest differences in how watches are actually made, meaning like the industrial side, the construction, and just over the last 20 years? Because watches from 20 years ago in a lot of ways feel similar to today. Of course, there's some new materials that maybe are used today that were less popular back then. But in your experience, how has the fundamental process of building a watch changed?
I would say it's more about when you work at the initial phases of making a watch and all the measurements and all this. Now you have so much help from computers, and all the simulation, the 3D renderings and this kind of stuff. This step has evolved a lot and enable us to really go faster and avoid tiny mistakes here and there, to be more precise in the way we basically conceive the watch. After that, when you physically make the watch, we still use most of the same tools, and most of the things we do are still requiring the hands of people. And that's the beauty of our industry. So I would say computer help us at different stages. But after that, when we really make the watch, we use the same machines, sometimes a bit more sophisticated, sometimes able to work more pieces at the same time. But at the end of the day, it's quite similar. And I think that's the beauty of it. Yeah.
It also seems that a watch brand today compared to a watch brand 20 years ago has to do a lot more things in-house. It used to be, you had to think about what watches to make. You had to design them. You had to make them. You had to ensure quality control. Now you have to market. You have to communicate. You have to develop relationships. You have to manage stores. There's a lot of extra things that you have to do. Is the size of the average major watch brand larger today? Are the companies larger by necessity? Or are they still actually the same size and just somehow figure out how to do a lot more stuff?
No, I would say we should never forget that originally, and probably when I started, people were still using watch to get the time, and that's something incredible because originally watches were made to tell you time. And probably when I started, I had my first cell phone during those years. So we were still using watches a lot to have time. And this has evolved a lot. Watches have always be also part of the personality of the people, of the clients, sometimes the status symbol, especially in some cultures, in some countries. And that has remained. But now it's more about the image you give by wearing XYZ watch instead of just a tool to give you time. We can do so many things with our cell phones at the moment. The watch is really, it's more like a dress or something you want to carry, an object that you enjoy. And that's why we are working a lot on marketing, on communication. We have seen more and more brands using ambassadors and friends of the brands and these kind of things that were not so common at that time. So I believe that this has changed a lot. From a tool to give you time to an object that gives you, some characteristic of your personality.
One of the interesting things that goes with this shift was the interest of large corporations to purchase watch brands for reasons outside of them being able to make timekeepers. You've worked for a few of them, including the Richemont Group and LVMH, that have purchased traditional watch brands not because of their amazing ability to be precision instrument makers, but because of their ability to make desirable objects.
True.
What started this trend exactly? Was it some companies starting to buy these up? Was it this watch group? I'm just wondering where luxury watch brands as a producer of a desirable object sort of became on the radar of these finance groups.
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say, and I think you touched the right word. It's all about desirability, and again, it went from something that had a real function to something that was becoming an object of desire, some often rare, limited by production, with more and more people getting interested into watches. And I think it became kind of something you collect, something you like to care about. And people started to feel like having more and more of those objects. And that's been the trend. Before, you tend to have a watch, and you were keeping it for 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, sometimes longer. And now it became something that you collect. You want different ones. You want one for the day, sometimes one to go out. And it became an object that's really much more part of today's life, which is kind of a paradox, because you need it less than before to give you the time, but you care more about having a few watches for your look, for your personality, and that kind of aspect. So I think that's probably the reason why it grew that way. Yeah.
The person who had your job right before you is a member of the Arnault family.
Right.
And they are the family that runs LVMH. And I actually was looking at a list of, I might even be missing one, but of all the different TAG Heuer CEOs that I've personally dealt with, and it's 6 of them. And the list, I honestly, I may be forgetting somebody. Baban, Bianchi, Linder, Biver, Arnault, and now you, Tornare.
Yes.
I'm not sure that there's any other major watch brand that I've personally worked with closely through that much leadership. Yet the brand has remained remarkably sort of like on point. Yes, things have changed here and there, but there's sort of a lot of things that have remained very sticky. What is it about TAG Heuer that, despite leadership by 6 very strong, dominant personalities, the brand has not really mutated that much?
Mm-hmm. No, because I really believe that the first of all, LVMH Group is a group that gives a lot of importance to heritage and to brand's DNA. And we are really here to take care, and a big care, of those DNAs, and make sure that we develop the brand respecting its heritage and where we come from. And TAG Heuer has been created in 1860, so has a very long heritage, very strong identity often linked to performance, to sport, but also to know-how, and definitely to avant-garde, which is about innovation and creativity. And that's an exercise that's not easy. And I think my predecessors have done it in a very good way, so that the road remains the same. And you have to play between a long heritage, a long tradition, a very good know-how, because we've done incredible watches in our history, but we have to continue to develop. The minute you stop bringing new ideas, new initiatives, new ways of doing business, you are not anymore in line with the brand's DNA. And that's a tricky exercise, because you play with the tradition and the innovation, with the past and the future. And that's something that's been done well. That's why people recognize TAG Heuer as a brand that stick to who it is, And I think that's my mission, to also continue to move on. I was lucky to get to meet Jack Heuer a few weeks ago, and I was so happy to spend an hour with him, and we exchanged about it. And he confirmed that to me. He said, "TAG Heuer, it's great. Get the inspiration from our heritage, but never forget to bring creativity, to bring new ideas, to maintain this DNA of the brand." So
it's wonderful that Jack Heuer is still around and part of the company, but he's of course less active now than he used to be. And my question for you is that, from a creative perspective, where would you prefer to get inspiration from? Someone else that's been working closely with the brand, some other source. Every brand needs some type of direction. I'm just curious, for you, where do you like to go for this type of inspiration of where to take things?
Well, I think first of all, to really understand where you're going, you need to understand where the brand is coming from. So the first thing I did was to read as many books as possible about the brand, as well as, of course, Jack Heuer's book, which is actually just behind me, to really understand what had been the brand going through. And then, obviously, as you mentioned, all these gentlemen, I managed to meet them, spend some time with them, to listen to them also, to their own experience about TAG Heuer, to feel like I know the brand and when it went in the different directions over the last years, what I should take from that and what is for me the best vision for the coming years. And of course, last but not least, you know me, I'm a market person. And at the end of the day, we can do whatever we want at headquarters. The reality and the true success comes from our clients. So I'm spending time and I'm starting to travel more and more to get to listen to TAG Heuer aficionados, collectors, and clients, because these are the ones for me that gives you the best understanding and perspective for the future. So I'm really combining all that plus my own experience, my own feeling. I believe there are also things that I'm taking from my own experience in the different brands I worked for to make sure I can bring TAG Heuer to the next level. Yeah.
What did you learn immediately at Zenith that you think is particularly applicable to your now new role at TAG Heuer?
Well, Zenith was my first role as a CEO. So when you are running markets and you start becoming a CEO, you suddenly have to go further than looking after, I would say, sales, marketing, and your market vision. You suddenly have to run a manufacturer. You have to make sure finance is doing well. You have to make sure HR is moving forward the right way. And each of these departments. So this is definitely a type of leadership which is at a completely different level. And I was lucky to learn that at a smaller scale with Zenith for all those years. And that's definitely an experience I will bring with me. And obviously, I had spent a lot of time on the markets. And, between markets and headquarters, there are two different worlds. Sometimes communication between these two worlds are difficult. Sometimes it's difficult also to share the same vision, the same thing. So I feel with my own experience now, I can really understand both worlds and I can make it more efficient. And that's what I'm bringing to TAG Heuer for sure. Yeah.
What is the exact relationship with Frédéric Arnault right now? And the reason I mention this is that you're in the unique situation that the person who was your predecessor now has a job on the corporate side with some oversight over your division with watches. So the person was you inherited some of their projects. They probably feel a lot of emotional connection to it. How do you set boundaries, but also have to deal with someone that is now, a colleague you have to work with? It is a unique situation, right?
Yes, of course. But, we've known each other for many years. And of course, I'm lucky to have great supporters of TAG Heuer, because we could talk about Frédéric, who really has a special relationship with the brand, but also Stéphane Bianchi, who is now become the CEO of the LVMH group. And both of them are great supporters at the highest level of the group. And for me, it's very helpful because they are going to also help me to move forward and to go faster on many processes. So I think having Frédéric helps me also to have him around in order to keep a certain continuity on what has been done and bring it to the next level. And that's been a clear discussion between us at the beginning. We talk to each other almost every day, every 2 days. We see each other every week. If it's not physically, it's a Zoom. And I think it's very important for me. I'm saving a lot of time right now because I can exchange with him. And save time, and go faster because it's a brand that goes very fast. And for me, it's a very good way to move on the transition like that. Yeah, it's a mix of him having been dedicated to the extreme to that brand and me with my long experience. I mean, it's a very interesting collaboration.
It is like TAG Heuer supercharged LVMH right now because you essentially have the current CEO plus two former CEOs still overseeing it. It's almost like having multiple CEOs. Some redundancy. It's kind of amazing. Speaking of CEOs, I've always been curious about this. I know you're only going to say so much, but I always wonder what a CEO debrief is like, right? So at Zenith, where it used to be, and this is all still relatively new, only early in 2024 was it announced that you were, shifting this position. But Benoit de Klerk, is now the CEO of Zenith, the job that you used to have, and both of you used to be at the Richemont Group. What can you reveal about what you said to him during your debrief of, I'm handing you the CEO position, let me tell you some things as I make my way out?
Of course, I mean, I've known him for a long time, and I know how he's been working hard, and he has a great experience. So I was, first of all, very happy to have someone I know and I trust to take over a brand like Zenith that I really care a lot for. And I tried to be quite simple. You know, it goes beyond the reports and the documents that we obviously have shared and went through together. It was more about giving him some hints about the spirit of the brand, about the way I manage people at the brand, and the way he can also save time and be up to speed as soon as possible. So the fact that I knew him for a long time was very helpful, you know, to have, of course, the formal part of it, but also the informal. And I went very straightforward with him. We had quite a few sessions together, and I'm still here. I mean, I'm still here if he needs any question, if he has a thought here and there and he needs to exchange an opinion. I'm always here. We see each other also on a regular basis. So that makes the transition also much easier for Zenith, for sure. Yeah.
One thing that Zenith and TAG Heuer sort of have in common is the watch collection is sort of split into two radically different ways. One is sort of total heritage, very retro, and then the other is very, very modern. And I've always wondered at Zenith, what was easier from a sales perspective to get into the market, with the heritage pieces that you're so popular for, or the very modern stuff in another way you're also very popular for? What was easier?
Well, you know, that makes my experience in both brands super interesting because, and you're right, I mean, Zenith was perceived more as a tradition, manufacturer with the El Primero and all that. And maybe when I joined, it was missing a bit of a more contemporary touch, you know, and it was often seen as a brand that had been a bit dusty in the past. And my job has been to really bring it to the 21st century and show that you have a great history, you have a great know-how, but you live today, you live in 21st century. So make it a watch that you want to buy today. And that's been what we worked on for a few years, working on the brand platform or the repositioning of the brand. And I have the feeling that TAG Heuer is kind of an opposite way, and you mentioned it in your question, is a very modern, very fast-going brand, known for the sport, for, of course, car racing and events and a lot of great things that happen around the world. But people tend to forget in some markets specifically that the brand has a tremendous history, very rich, and a know-how that's quite amazing. And I think when you read the books or, for example, at Watches and Wonders, when we introduced the split second on the Monaco collection, some people were surprised because they didn't know that we had been making split seconds for more than 100 years. And that's something absolutely incredible in the watchmaking industry. So we have to show more about that at TAG Heuer, that yes, you buy a very cool brand of the 21st century, very modern, very of today, but you also buy an incredible heritage and a fantastic know-how. We have Carol Casapi working with us, who is certainly one of the top specialists of high watchmaking. We have incredible watchmakers as well in the manufacturer and technicians. So this is something that we need to balance. And again, between the two brands, it's always a balance between heritage, know-how, and being contemporary. And simply that it went a bit the other way from one brand to the other. Yeah.
We had Carol as well as Nicholas on a previous episode, so featuring a lot of people on the Superlative Podcast from TAG Heuer, because there's just so much exciting stuff going on. But it's actually good you brought her up because she's in charge of movements. And one of the things that Zenith was very fortunate to have was, in addition to sort of like profiles that are famous, it has a movement, the El Primero. And very few watch brands have a movement that people want, right? Like they don't necessarily care what's on the outside. They're like, oh, I want that movement. TAG Heuer is less well known for specific movements. Of course, there are some famous ones, Caliber 11, things like that. Do you think it's a good idea to sort of maybe help get a movement more famous, build up the sexiness of the Heuer 02 caliber? Is there something to that? I'm just sort of wondering, because I've always thought that, how to even strengthen the brand more is to not only make sexy outsides, but maybe sexy insides.
For sure, you have to work on both sides. I mean, when you have a movement stronger than your models, you have to develop the marketing around your models. And when you're missing an iconic movement, you need to develop one because it's part of the watch. You buy a design, but you also buy an engine. And I really think that when you want to buy a nice watch, you also want to know that there is some sort of know-how behind it and some technicity that will make it last long, or last forever even. So I think it's again a question of balance, but you need both. And I'm very happy to see that TAG Heuer is developing very strongly in terms of movement, technicity, as well as the level of finishing, which I was really happy to see, because my background, I'm coming from very high-end watchmaking at some time of my career, and I was really happy to see that at TAG Heuer it's the same. I mean, the level of finishing is getting to an incredible level, and that's something I cherish, and I think it's part of the dream. When you sell a watch, you have to talk about different things depending on what your client is interested into, but explaining that a movement has been done in a certain way to reach the best quality possible is definitely an important point. Yeah.
Now that I'm thinking about it in a very real way, over the last 15, 20 years, TAG Heuer has been a real maverick when it's come to movements. Not just that you've had a lot of new movements, but the spectrum from low to high end, from the different places that they've come from and the different sort of theories around it. It's almost if you were a car maker, people would be fascinated by the different engines that you've chosen and the ones that you've built. And no doubt you'll continue that. I'm sure you recognize that's an important part of it. But anybody listening to this, I would encourage them to sort of investigate, because, you could get sort of a basic ETA movement in a TAG Heuer or a Sellita, or some crazy in-house, high precision chronograph or a solar. The different types of chronographs you've made is just a vast variety. It's like you could learn all about chronographs, the movement, just by seeing in the past 20 years what TAG Heuer's put into theirs. And I think that there's a richness because you're not bound by something. You feel a comfort as a brand to do things in slightly different ways, as long as it sort of fits a basic mold. And that flexibility, I think, is powerful. And I think it's hard sometimes on your end, especially in Switzerland, where you sometimes celebrate rigidity. You call it codes, but it really is celebrating rigidity. But there's a wonderful looseness to that at TAG Heuer. Do you agree, disagree? Because I just see there being more room to play at the brand.
Yes, of course. I mean, no, I fully agree. It's a brand that can be, in a way, seen and perceived in many different ways. And that's, again, the DNA of the brand. So we really can dare to try new things. And you mentioned a few. The solar graph is an incredible technology that is, for me, giving a new dimension to quartz.
So great.
Connected watches has been also a very surprising approach. We could mention the lab-grown diamonds that we're using in some of our watches. All these things are a demonstration of the fact that TAG Heuer is avant-garde and is not shy to try new things. And that's why we have we can go from a split second that we launched a month ago in Geneva to last weekend when we launched this re-edition of the Formula One, famous in the 80s and 90s with the Kiss collaboration that we just launched. Two very different products. And that's the magic and the beauty of TAG Heuer. It's that the brand has done so many things. You mentioned the chronograph, of course, but more than that, we can play. The playground is limitless, really.
You mentioned the smartwatches and the connected. I want to talk about that a little bit. I've always been fascinated. Sure. That I've been one of the few people that has been really promoting the luxury smartwatch ever since the beginning, and I'm by no means surprised at some of the success. You haven't been in a management position before where you've sort of seen how it goes, the costs associated, profitability. When you sat down and started looking at some of the performance statistics around smartwatches, both in terms of what you were making and what the costs were, what were some of your initial reactions to it? Obviously, it's a very different business, but explain to someone who's very much a traditional watchman sees this, which is watches, but a very different type of industry. What are some of some of your reactions?
It was quite simple. It's actually new for me, and my first comment was that in my whole career, I didn't even work with that I recall that a quartz watch, even a quartz watch. So I had to get back to quartz watches and definitely open up my own mind to see what connected watches were all about. But I was again extremely surprised and positively surprised to see that the TAG Heuer connected watches are a real mix and a real balance of technology, but also of design. And when I put it on my wrist, first week, I remember I put one on my wrist and I started to play with it. And I was like, okay, first of all, it's very nice because it's a cool tool with a lot of functions, but also I feel like I have a real watch because of the shape. It's a real shape. There is a case because of the watch face that you can play with. Now we even introduced new watch faces linked to the other collection. So I really felt very good with it. And I even surprised myself being more on the, I would say, traditional or watchmaking. I felt very happy and I wear it very often when I do sport or even sometimes just during weekends. And I think it's a very, very cool watch because you get the best of the both worlds. And again, it's a different business model. So you have to approach it differently. You need to have different kind of people managing this unit. But at the end of the day, we are all on the same boat and all linked to the TAG Heuer mindset. And that's fantastic. It's another demonstration, as I said before, of how we can be avant-garde and bring new things. So I push them as I do push the traditional watchmaking to bring new ideas, new innovation for the coming years.
Which is, of course, necessary. And you're quite fortunate, actually, because within the Google Wear OS operating system environment, you are a class-leading product. You are the best luxury watch. If you want a high-end watch, with that operating system, you get
True.
the TAG Heuer connected. And in traditional watches, it's hard to argue who has a dominant position anywhere. It's so fiercely competitive.
Yeah.
Do you agree that there's room to grow in the smartwatch sector?
I'm convinced about it. I mean, some people feared the connected watches when it came to the market, thinking it was a tough competition to regular watches, and a little bit like some feared when the quartz revolution came, and we could see that we basically continue to make beautiful mechanical watches. So I think it's a complement. It's another object that you put on your wrist. It's another tool that you put on your wrist. It brings functions. It helps. I mean, there are many things that are being developed, whether for sports, for wellness, for health, that are useful, and people are more and more concerned about these topics. So I think it's limitless. And yes, there are a lot of developments, and we basically offer a product again that give you many functionalities, but still you have a feeling of wearing a watch and not simply of using a cell phone, and that's our clients are looking for that, our golf application are doing very well. And I'm not a golfer myself, so I had to really go on golf courses and talk to players and get to understand what they need, what they like. And they are very enthusiastic about that watch that we offer. So I think there is a lot more to be done. And I don't see it as a competition to traditional watchmaking. I see it as a complement. I think it will add, and it will show new generations as well that Swiss watchmaking is not turned to the past, but it's really looking forward and working hand in hand with their generation. And that's important also to keep them interested in watchmaking in general.
I certainly agree with you. And I also want to know, with having more and more divisions, you have the traditional watch division, which you said operates quite differently than the smartwatch division, which is very true. You also have the return of the eyewear division.
Right.
Do you have sort of like generals that oversee these divisions that report to you, or do you still actively oversee these very, very different types of business units?
No, I mean, the traditional watch department is organized as most of the watch brands. So it's quite the way I know. And yes, we have a dedicated team to the connected watches, and we have a very small department also in charge of eyewear. And I'm in touch with them every week. I mean, we are very close here, even though we start to have to be a big team. But I'm very close to people. I like people. I like to talk to them all the time. So that's my way of doing. I'm someone trusting. I have style of management, which is more about empowering people and letting them develop themselves and develop their units. But of course, I always keep an eye on everything, and I like to be informed. So it's something that we have found a good rhythm, I think. Yeah, since I joined, I'm very happy about the way it works.
It's definitely a lot of things to handle. So I will forgive you for sometimes not always knowing what one arm is up to. No. One of the things which is interesting about TAG Heuer, that's again different from some of the other brands you worked at, is how important the ambassadors are, the relationship to the product and celebrity, working with famous athletes and stuff like that. Like, it is a brand that for a number of decades has really supported ambassadors and sponsorships and stuff like that. Of course, again, this is yet another thing to experience and learn. But talk a little bit about, this part of your job, which is really, I guess, celebrity relations and making sure that the brand is with all the rest of the cool kids doing the fun stuff.
True. No, it's a very important aspect. It's been proven over the last couple of decades, I would say, when brands started to use ambassadors or friend of the brand, or the way you name them is more or less for the same thing, is to raise awareness and desirability of the brand. And I think it's a very good tool. It works well. It's important to a brand. However, it has to be perceived as authentic. When I say that, I would say public know that there are deals between some of these celebrities and the brands. Yes, they could be, but they have to be meaningful, and that's something I'm really careful myself. And I think TAG Heuer has been as well, is that when you hire someone to help you on developing the awareness or the desirability, you have to make sure that we share the same values. We share the same values. We all linked by, for example, at TAG Heuer, by performance, by sport, by often car racing in our case, interested in that, so that the relationship is meaningful to our clients. Otherwise, I've seen collaborations that were, in my opinion, failures in the watch industry because it was just too much opportunism and not enough authenticity. So that's something I really pay attention. And when I hire an ambassador, I pay even more attention than when I hire staff to make sure that we are fully aligned on where we want to go. You also have to test the level of motivation and to make sure that it goes beyond a deal, an agreement, but that the person really likes the brand, understands it, and wants to get involved for real. When we do products, for example, with someone, I'm very frustrated if I don't see this person getting involved and engaged in the product development, which is rare. Normally, we get to have people super interested in our products, but that's the way we work with. And I think if you do that, it's a fantastic leverage for a brand.
During the era of Jean-Claude Biver, especially at Hublot, he sort of said, let's do a lot of events and let's work with a lot of people. And he was actually able to bring out the enthusiasm people. But when his attention was elsewhere and he left, a lot of that continued, you're right, without some of the heart and soul that allowed his sort of strategy to work really well, because he created people's attention in a way that they really cared. And now what you're saying is that there has to be meaning behind everything. You can't just slap your names there and take a bunch of pictures for Instagram and call it a day. Consumers can see through that. Everyone's got to agree that there is some type of sum after you've put all these pieces together, right?
Absolutely. And, we work for the long term, and that's something we should always remember. We are only here for a few years, we people, when the brand has been here for, centuries. So I think it's important to keep it in mind, and whatever we do, it has to be for the long term. And I think, when you do something just for a short-term opportunity, it might create some buzz, but then it goes down again. And when you do things, being very careful on the meaning, it's going to build the brand equity for the long term. And that's, for me, something I could experience at many different occasions. And my job is to bring that brand to the next level, but also to make sure it continues to develop in the future after I'm gone,
In terms of events, not so much personalities, but events that the brand sponsors, what are some of your personal favorite ones? Things that the brand involves with that you really like, that you feel work well and that maybe help commercially a lot?
Oh, if I take TAG Heuer, recently I've been attending a few Formula One Grand Prix because we are partnered with Red Bull Racing, and that's been great for me to really better and better understand the link, the historical connection between the brand and motor racing for sure. But it's also a great way to invite our clients and to give them an experience that beyond what we can imagine. I mean, an experience that money cannot buy. And that's something I really like because, again, buying a watch, you don't need a watch. You buy an emotion. You buy something that will make you feel better. And when you surround this product, when you add to this product an incredible experience like the one we could offer, and I remember even last weekend, some people with their kids or their wives and joining us and having such an incredible weekend, you really feel that you bring this kind of experience to clients that will also share it. And I'm not talking Instagram, I'm talking with their friends, people to people. And that's something that's very important for brands today. So these events I really enjoy. As well as, of course, when we do more intimate kind of gathering or dinners during which we talk about watchmaking. You also have a great time sharing about passion we all have and explaining why a watch is like this and what we will develop in the future and feed really the enthusiasm of those clients or collectors. And that's something I've always liked a lot. I'm a market, I'm a field guy. I feel much more useful when I'm spending time with the clients than when I'm doing a report or a long meeting.
I did a survey recently that sort of resulted in some interesting information. Never really quite thought about it, but it makes sense. And it was part of an article that was called, How Were You Treated When You Went to the Watch Store? Basically, the idea was to sort of gauge sentiment. And in that article was a multiple choice question. I was really trying to determine one of two things: how you were treated and if you bought something, right? So you could have been treated great and bought something, could have been treated great and didn't buy something, could have been treated terribly and bought something, could have been treated terribly and not bought something. What I've learned, sort of getting to the point, was that among the respondents, the way that the experience made them feel was more important than what they bought. And watch brands today are starting to realize this, but not quite saying it. And you said it yourself, but you hyper focus on the product so much, thinking people are going to buy us because our watches are so darn good, and they do have to be good because it's such a competitive place. Yeah. But the reason they buy you is because you're a good host and a good friend. If you show them a good time, you make them feel noticed, loved, important, special, or just that they're able to celebrate themselves with you. You will get their business when they have disposable income. Yes, your product has to be pretty and competitive. And perfect. Yeah. But what we found is that when people were not treated well at the watch store, they didn't buy something regardless. So them being treated well was more important than the store even having something they want.
Of course. No, but I mean, it's part of the whole, I would say, the world we live in now. When we are lucky enough to have some disposable income to acquire luxury goods or to stay in a nice hotel or to go to a nice restaurant, people want to have a good time. And, a restaurant is a perfect example. The food can be good. The ambience can be nice. But if the level of service and the way you are welcome to a restaurant is not right, I mean, you're not going to go back for sure. I want to have a good time. Even if the food is great, I'm not going to go back. So it's part of that. And sometimes we forget about it. And I always tell my salespeople, not to think about selling when someone is entering, but trying to get to know the person and give him or her a good time. And the sale that you're going to make after might be a consequence of your good work, but don't think first about the credit card. Think first about the client. I did the same when we started the Watch and Wonders show a month ago. We had all the briefing and I gave the objectives and how I want this whole show to be done and organized. But at the end, I told people, you know what? Have fun. Enjoy your time. We're going to have a great time together. We're going to have fun, and let's share that together. Why? Because if your team is happy, smiling, welcoming, and happy about it, they will make everybody feel this vibe, around the booth, around for retailers, for press, for end clients. And we forget about that sometimes. So I'm very much into that. And I try to, as a leader, to really drive people to create this positive atmosphere around us and around the brand. Because some brands do a very different approach. And the approach is, let's all
together collectively worship the product. And you see this, like the leader of the brand is like, no, it's not about me. It's about how amazing the product is. And everyone sort of becomes this cult of worshiping the product to the point where it's like, you can't touch it unless you're wearing gloves, or how dare you let someone other than the watchmaker activate it, And this becomes so unrelatable to the human experience that it becomes alienating. And we still have this amongst some of the brands that we're displaying, just probably a few feet, right, from the TAG Heuer booth. And then you have the other brands that are more congenial and understand that it's the welcoming nature of the experience, which makes people want to approach the brand and ultimately buy from the brand.
Yes, I agree. I think, you have I would say the very high-end luxury where you have all this drama around the product and the things, and it's part of the magic. And some clients might like that kind of atmosphere. I think TAG Heuer is more of, I would say, a casual luxury, an accessible luxury to some extent, with careful with the word accessible, but in a way that people have to feel good about it, and that's a compliment I often got from clients. I remember in Australia a month ago, or in China a bit after, and more recently in the US, people consider the brand as being a luxury brand doing very high quality product, but still cool, still cool, casual watches that they dare to take in their hands and wear every day if they want to. And I think that's important to also have watches brands that still offer this kind of atmosphere. When you enter a TAG Heuer boutique, or when you enter our booth in Watches and Wonders, I want people to feel comfortable. I don't want people to feel shy, embarrassed, and they don't know how to behave. You know what I mean? So that's, and it's not because people have financial means that are important that they don't want this kind of atmosphere, welcoming and friendly and casual. Yeah. So that's what we want to do at TAG Heuer for sure.
Speaking of Watches and Wonders, one of the most popular questions I heard being asked there, and this might surprise you, maybe you heard it as well, is people are already starting to have nostalgia about Baselworld. And one of the most popular questions was, what do you miss about Baselworld? And so I'm asking you, do you miss anything so far about Baselworld?
Yes, to some extent. I would say there was a special atmosphere in Basel. Geneva is my hometown, so I know it by heart. And when I was going to Basel, it was for me like traveling or going to a different place. Now I feel I'm at home when I do the show. I wouldn't say I miss that much. I think the idea is more having as many brands as possible in the same spot. And I think that's important. I'm very happy we are part of it, because I always told everyone, I think we should have one main timing, one main location, and have everybody part of it celebrating watchmaking, because we work 365 days per year on developing our own brand. And maybe a few days, we could also think about the industry and how we promote the industry and how we make watchmaking more and more interesting to more people and also to more of the younger generations. And sometimes, put a little bit of our competitiveness on the side and think industry wide. And I think we still have work to do on that, but I hope Geneva one day will become a platform. And like you have a Festival de Cannes for the movies, we should have the Festival of Watches in Geneva for all the brands that make this city shine for watches for a week or 10 days or something. And that's for me important, that it's always in the same place. Yeah.
It would be nice to see the city rally around a little bit more, extend it, make it a longer period of time, make more activations and things like that. I mean, in a sense, Geneva is almost on the edge of celebrating it, but I think it could be more like Hong Kong. You remember Hong Kong, which was really like one big shrine to watches? If you could somehow take some of that spirit and that energy and inject it into Geneva, the whole place could be like a Disneyland for timepieces where you could also buy them, right?
True. That'd be amazing. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's going this way. I have to say the Watches and Wonders organization developed this watch in the city and different activation with concerts and things, and asking all the boutiques to stay open and animate their boutiques. I think it becomes more and more lively. And also something I pushed a lot for in the past, and I'm happy to see it happening, is also B2C, and not only B2B. I think it was a bit restrictive to have it only B2B. Now we have like 4 days B2B and 3 days B2C, and I think it should develop even more. It's a great thing.
Would you want to sell watches there? Would you want people to be able to, because a lot of the other shows around the world, you can buy watches there.
Yeah, why not? I mean, personally, I think I'm open to any new ideas, and I think why not? People are surrounded by beautiful brands. They are in the emotion of seeing incredible timepieces all around them. So if they want to buy, why couldn't they,
For me, that's the next step, because I see the reason that there's a lot of other shows around there. And it's for the exhibitors, it's being able to sell, not just see the consumer, but actually sell. Yeah, you can have dealers and stuff as well. So going back to TAG Heuer, one of the last things that Frédéric Arnault sort of talked about, at least when I was around, when he exited his position as CEO, was once again a sort of return to an upmarket positioning for TAG Heuer. And I've sort of seen this happen a couple of times, this vacillation of the average price point is going up. Oh, again, the average price will go. And it's not that it necessarily keeps going up. Sometimes it goes down and then it's like, let's go back up again. What was some of the thinking behind that? Where is this desire coming from to move further up market? What does that mean? And how will that translate itself over the next several years?
I think it's not about pricing to go up or prices to go up. It's about elevating the brand, and it's about bringing more to the products. You cannot increase price just to increase price, because then clients wouldn't understand. You have to, the idea with TAG Heuer is really to take every single detail, again, movement we talked about, but develop more sophisticated movement, work a lot on the level of finishing. And that's something I really saw myself, and I was happy about it. The ergonomy of the watch also, I'm someone very much on that. I had discussions yesterday with my team about the type of straps and bracelets and buckles and the shape of the case and all these little details that are going to make someone really buy the watch and appreciate the watch. And that has, of course, a cost, and that could imply a price increase. But we don't increase price just to increase price. It's a consequence of a better work. And that's the idea, really elevating the brand, that's really the idea at 360. And when I say elevate, it's of course the product, but it could be the boxes, the retail concept, the website. I mean, all 360 experience that we offer to clients, as well as the different touch points. So that's really the idea when we talk about elevation. Yeah.
I know we're almost out of time. So really the last question has to do with your individual fingerprint. You haven't even been in the job yet for 6 months. And as people know, it takes sometimes up to 6 years to get one product gone from sort of concept to actual final production. But have you thought at all yet about what you want your fingerprint on TAG Heuer to be like, based upon your interests, and where you think you can make the most impact?
Quite a few topics, and you're right, it's been only 4 months, so definitely the products that you can see, the beautiful products we are launching this year, I don't take any credit, and I'm thankful and happy to launch those beautiful watches. But already next year, I'm working to make some modification or to bring my own touch. After that, I will definitely be very much involved on product, because that's something I love. And I think at the end of the day, we discussed about that earlier. You can do a great job at all levels. You sell watches, so your watches first have to be perfect and have to match clients' expectation. Beyond this, what I will definitely bring is my long experience as well as my market experience. Again, today, between the two worlds of markets and headquarters, it's not always easy to understand each other well. And that's where I have to play the bridge. I have to make the connection. I have to make sure that we listen to the clients, that everything we do in the manufacturer, we think about the clients. Retail is a big strategic development for us. Even though if we continue to, of course, develop our key partners, but we have opened up quite a few boutiques. I need to work on the retail culture to, again, elevate it, bring it to the next level, and many other topics. So I think I'm really going to work on all these aspects with the team and make sure that we meet our ambition, which is quite high for the next few years, I can tell you.
I like that term, retail culture. I think that's what we're going to have to talk about the next time that we catch up.
With pleasure,
everyone, this has been the Superlative Podcast interview with Julien Tornare, CEO of TAG Heuer. Julien, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ariel, and to everyone listening to us. Have a good day.